Hey guys, we're going to be taking a look at Bora's Miterix angle duplicator, and it's a tool for quickly setting up a miter saw cut for trim or baseboards or crown molding. It lets you bisect the angle, and you just set it in the corner, and it does its thing. You don't have to guess at what the angle is, or if you have a wall that's not quite 90 degrees, it'll eliminate any gaps in your molding for you. So let's take a closer look at this thing. All right, so this tool is actually pretty simple in concept, but it's a really smart design. So what this does is you set it in a corner. Probably not going to have any acute angles like that. Or it does outside corners as well by doing it this way and sliding these little aluminum rails up. So once you set that angle, you can crank it down with this knob, and that locks it in. And then you actually want to pop this thing off and set up your miter saw with this. So now we've got half of that angle. We go set it on our miter saw and adjust the angle that way. Then once you're done with your cut, you can just snap this back on. This is a brass bushing, and this part's metal when it pops back on. But one thing that gives me a little bit concern is this is plastic right here, and it's popping around another brass bushing. Look at I mean, it's not too sturdy looking there. I mean, those are thin pieces that are having to flex every time you pop it in and pop it out. And you have to pop this out every time you do a corner. So that's a lot of stress on this, and that's a lot of cycles. So one thing I do have concern about is if this plastic holds up over time, and I'm not sure it will. That's not to say it won't. This is just my concerns with the design of it. And see, it'll just pop right back in there. The other thing that I think this is really missing is an angle scale. If they had just put a scale with what angle you're at, they could have a little pin sticking up off of here that references. Doesn't have to be right on the center, because obviously you couldn't read if it was right on the center of the little locking screw right here. But if they had put an angle scale up here, you could have one guy, standing up on the ladder, calling out measurements, and another guy cutting crown molding. And that would go a lot faster instead of having to physically carry this tool back and forth every single time. So if you want to do both, you're going to have a different tool with an actual angle measuring device on it instead of just a reference tool, because this one has to be carried back to the saw to set up. That just would have been so simple to put a little scale on here with a little indicator that tells you what angle you're at. And one other thing that gives me a little bit cause for concern is, it's not a huge deal, but these little rails, they were obviously just cut from an extruded piece of this profile right here of aluminum. But if you look at both ends of these, I think this outside, I'm pretty sure that's anodized, but they didn't anodize it after they cut it, and it looks like they just hacked this piece off and then stuck it up against a belt sander or a grinder and just rounded that corner off. And it's a really crappy job. The finish is not smooth. This is really sharp. It's not deburred. So it comes across as a little bit cheap. It still works. Don't get me wrong on that. And I do like the overall function of the tool. It seems like they took some shortcuts. And for the $35 price point for this, I think I would have rather seen it, closer to 20 actually. Maybe a little bit more. It does have brass parts and aluminum parts, but some of it is plastic too. And I don't expect an all metal tool from this, but the important pieces, once again, this right here, I really feel like that should have been metal. We'll see if it lasts. It could last, and I could just be, worried about it for no reason. All right, so if I was putting crown molding up on this corner, it's a tricky angle to get. It's an outside corner, and it's not 90 degrees, obviously. It's closer probably to 135. So to do this, we take the tool, we extend these rails out forward, and then you just kind of reference it off this face, and you got to make sure though that this red part is completely horizontal, otherwise you're going to get the wrong angle. So there we are. It's flat against both these rails. And now just going to lock it down with this and then double check it didn't move when I was locking it down. It's still on there. It's good. All right, now I'm going to go make my cut. All right, so we had our setup from the wall. To get half that angle, you just pull this piece off, pop it completely out, slide this back, and you can see I've already got the saw set up for the angle. But put this aluminum side up against the fence, and then line the plastic part up with the blade, and make your cut. And for the other side, you just do the exact opposite and line the blade up with the aluminum piece and make the other cut. And you're ready to install your crown molding or trim on the wall. Now, one thing this does require you to do is when you set this up, you've got to cut it with the crown molding up against the fence like this at the spring angle it's going to be at. And I don't really like cutting crown molding like that. Normally I use a lookup table and lay it flat and then miter and bevel it and cut it, and I just feel like it's a more secure way to do it, and I get a more precise angle that way, because there's a little bit of wiggle room with the spring angle here where you can get it not perfect. That's just my preference. It's faster to do it the other way because there's no math involved, there's no lookup tables involved. You just reference off of this, set up your cut, and go. And of course, if you've got an outside corner, you've got to cut it upside down so the angle is right with the miter. All right, so got the two pieces that we just cut, and you can see, well, I gotta get the spring angles right here. There we go. It's a pretty tight miter. This little gap right here is because the wall is curved, so it's no fault of the angle tools. So there is one step, no lookup tables, no complicated math. As long as you cut with the crown molding up against the fence at an angle, after using that angle duplicator tool, you get nice, perfect miters every time. All right, so this tool is all about time savings and ease of use. So, funny story, a few years back, my neighbor was putting up crown molding in his house, and he could not for the life of him figure out how to get one weird angle. It was like 120 degrees, and I think he was assuming it was 135 degrees. It was a little, doorway that cut across the 90-degree corner of a room, and he had a pile of scraps of cutoffs that he had been testing, trying to get it right. And this thing, if I had it back then, it would have saved him all of that time. And as it was, he came over and asked me for help, and I got out a lookup table and measured the angle and laid it flat and did a miter and bevel on it. And it took me a few minutes to do that, but I got it on the first try. But if I had had this, I could have saved a few minutes. And if it saves a few minutes on a lot of corners, that time savings really adds up. So I do like the idea and the concept of this. And it does work really great for getting tight miters. I just don't like cutting with the crown molding up at an angle against the fence. I feel like it's not quite as accurate as actually laying it flat and then doing a precise miter and bevel. Pros out there, though, they're probably all going to set it up against the fence like this at an angle because it's just faster. All right, so wrapping up, I do like this thing. It is a time saver. It's a good idea. There's a couple little, changes I'd make here and there. These rails would have been deburred, in my opinion, would have been a lot better and anodized the whole surface. And they look like they're handmade. Don't like that. And then that plastic little, piece that slips over the bushing here, that might weaken over time because you're stressing it every time you make a cut with this thing, every time you use it to reference a cut. And then I wish they had a little scale right here that gave you your angles. But those are really the only improvements I can think on this thing, and they're not huge ones. So I do like this tool. I think it's a recommend if you do a lot of molding or if you've got a lot of projects coming up and you just don't want to spend a lot of head-scratching time figuring out your cut angles. So hopefully this review is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below. And once again, don't forget to subscribe.